Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back to Inside the Lines. Today's the last show of the week, so we're going to go over the final looks of the week, the final movement, and that will be a lot about the prop market, showing you where the odds makers have honestly overlooked misplaced lines. We want to show you where the value is. We found the holes to where they are. Now, we don't have Jake today, but we have Steven, who's going to go through Jake's infamous boatload of player props, but we've slimmed him down a little bit, and Jake has given us all his information, so all is well there. So let's hit a couple of the deep cuts in college football, some players we might not all know, but neither does Vegas, so we have a lot of value on some of these lines.
Yeah, I'll be channeling my inner Jake, so I don't know how he got out of the dungeon that we keep him in. Someone's going to be fired for that. Hey, I'm Jake Fentner, and I know more than you about every other sport, and don't try to compete with me in a talking contest. But Deacon Hill, over half an interception at -125. That implies around 55%. In our model, it's probably around more like 99%. So Jacob points out that Hill is a transfer from Wisconsin, and so their DB should know his tendencies. And then Wisconsin is 21st in the country in interception rate. So that sounds like one interception, which is what Hill has had in his two starts with Iowa, one each. Ohio State, Cade Stover, over 37.5 receiving yards. The line has him at 3.5 receptions. And so Vegas expects 3 catches. He averages 16 yards per catch. So I'm not a rocket scientist, but 3 times 16 is 48. So that's right with our projection is actually underneath that. So we like the value. We think that line doesn't make sense. I love when you see a reception line not match the yardage line. Something's going on there. Jamal Banks at Wake, over 4.5 receptions. Another classic case where I think the line is kind of lazily set. So Banks last year averaged 4.5 receptions. I assume that was with Sam Hartman, a far better quarterback. And they just basically said, okay, Banks had 4.5 last year. He's been doing better this year, but they have a worse quarterback, so we'll keep it at 4.5. But he's averaging 6.5 receptions this year with a significant, huge 30% target share. That's like Justin Jefferson, NFL Cooper Kupp type target share. So he's had 8+ targets in all but one game. And when he didn't, he still had his 4 receptions on 5 targets. Mario Anderson. Jake thinks that DK Joyner, the other running back on the team, is going to be the goal line back, and that this line was that you can get the under is the better value because everyone saw Florida's defense get rolled over by Kentucky, and Kentucky has a much better running back in Ray Davis, who ran for like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But that's the only game where Florida actually allowed the opposing team starting running back to score on the ground. So that's just in one of the last 6 games that they've done that. So Jake likes the under in this. Dylan Johnson, over 18.5 receiving yards. Again, odds makers are overreacting to the fact that when he was at Mississippi State, he averaged 25 receiving yards. In Washington, he's only averaging 19. So they set the line based on his Washington numbers. But he started the year with basically no receptions. And then this last game, he had 5 receptions for 48 yards. So Jake's speculating that they're pretty much going to start shifting him back to his Mississippi State role, where he's essentially a receiver out of the backfield. So that's, again, so if this line was playing for his Mississippi State, it'd probably be set at 24.5. Alan Bowman, under 243.5 passing yards. He averages just 10 yards of completion. Well, 10 yards of completion is not horrible, but so that simple math, he needs over 23 completions to hit his over if it's a normal game. His betting line is only 21.5. So the odds makers don't think he's going to hit that. And he's only hit 23 or more completions. Maybe I have the numbers in front of me. 2 of his last 8 games when he's had double-digit pass attempts. So when he's been like the starting quarterback, he's only hit 24 or more twice. J.J. McCarthy. So this is a case where, the college rule where sacks count negatively on rushing totals. Jake points out that McCarthy didn't have a lot of yards last week, but he was playing a really easy non-conference opponent. And Michigan does not want McCarthy to get hurt like he's had as a freshman. So they say, just stay in the pocket, take a sack. No one cares. We're going to win by 40. Indiana, their opponent this week, is one of the 4 worst teams in sack rate. So there shouldn't be a lot of sacks on McCarthy be negatives. So without the negative yards, if he's not sacked twice for a negative 12 yards, then it's all upside. So McCarthy's got really good scrambling ability. And so we have him for, a good 10 yards of cushion over this. His 6.7 yards per carry, so it may only take 2 or 3 attempts.
Wow. Good stuff.
Whew.
Basically, Jake,
Yeah.
round of applause for Steven. Good stuff
I'm
there.
like that Will Ferrell scene at the end when he's in the debate. That's how you debate.
Right.
Woo!
Yeah. But look, I mean, these are lines that not a lot of people are paying attention to. You can find good value on Prize Picks, Underdogs. If you have books that get you these props, definitely something to look into. You guys know how great Jake is at these lines and picking them apart. We'll move a little bit more into Steven's neck of the woods with the NFL. So we're showing you some lines that we honestly just think are misplaced, and we think the odds makers are wrong, and our model usually agrees with us in that sense. So, for example, we'll start with Justice Hill for Baltimore. His average on last season and this season are misleading, but in this certain situation, you think he can go over 26.5 yards. And that shopping cart represents that you can shop around for this number.
Yeah, you could see like plus 100 on DraftKings last time I checked, and you'd rather get that than a minus 115 or so. So, his average is only 21 yards per game this season. So it got ticked up because he had a pretty good couple explosive runs against Pittsburgh last week. But the average, it's a lazy line because this week 1, he only had 9 yards on 8 carries, but he had 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So he had 2 great runs. They just were untouched from 1 yard, 2 yards out. Mm-hmm. So if those carries had happened in midfield, maybe he runs for 30 more yards. So it's just one of those cases where I also listened to the podcast on the Ravens have, and Justice Hill was on the podcast talking about just how awful he felt about that fumble, which again, no one feels more awful than I did. But the big thing about Hill is Todd Monken was an Oklahoma State offensive coordinator a few years before Justice Hill got there. But Oak State basically kept a lot of his principles. So Hill just came in and just got it immediately. And there's some reason why they're not trusting Gus Edwards. So like last week against Pittsburgh, I thought they would just feed Gus 3 times and we'd win the game-sealing touchdown. And they didn't do that. Right. So, and with the goal line runs that Justice Hill's been getting, I kind of like his usage rate to be higher and his explosiveness to be higher. And what are the chances he fumbles again?
Right.
Hopefully not that high. Josh Oliver, again, I'm going to tap into my Ravens obsession. So Justin Jefferson's out. Josh Oliver only averages 8.6 receiving yards a game. But I think with Jefferson out, he's going to benefit because they're going to – so the odds maker said, 8.6, yeah, he's a tight end, so he'll get a little bit more with Jefferson now, not too much. But it's more the sets. Like, I don't know the intricacies of Minnesota's offense well enough, but without Jefferson, it leads me to believe they may have to run the ball more. Josh Oliver turned his career around by becoming a very good run blocker, where he was a really bad one coming into the league. So if they look to run the ball more effectively, then Oliver might be on the field more in 2 tight end sets with Hawkinson.
Right.
So out of that 30% targets that would go to Jefferson, it's going to be redistributed. Probably 25 of that to the big 3 on the team who are left. But he might get that 5% chunk to go along with his already 6% chunk, and all of a sudden he's at that 10% range of the team's targets, and he's a pretty good athlete. So when he does get the ball, he can run for some extra yak.
Yeah, that might a little bit of target share might be able to help him. A question in the chat while we're on that game. We're talking about Jordan Addison, again, part of that big 3. We're talking about, do we like his target share to go up and hit over 51.5 receiving yards?
I believe we do. Let me check real quick. Yeah, we have Addison at 69 yards projected. So you got to assume that his receiving yard percentage in this short start of his career is right around 17%. It's kind of hard to imagine that not being closer to 25% in this game. Mm-hmm. And Chicago's defense, there could be a little bit of weather, not bad enough to warrant more than a 1.5 point adjustment. Or maybe a 10% knockoff in yardage. But, I think this is still a, high 200, 300 yard game for Cousins, and Addison could be in line for, again, around 75 yards.
Right. Yeah. So we'll move back to your last pick here with Tony Pollard, who his career average or season average is kind of skewed as well. And this is probably an overreaction to the Chargers looking a lot better.
Yeah, I like this because his 66.5 rushing yards is basically a reflection of what he's averaging this year. And so his yards per carry is way down. His explosive run rate of 10 yards or more is down from 16% a year ago to 7.4%. And I'm not sure if I'm not saying it's going to go back up to 16, but I think that 7.4 is really bad. And so if he just regresses back to if he has a little bit left in the tank, then he goes back to that 12% level, then that should be enough to tick him over. On the flip side, people think the Chargers' run defense has gotten much better. It was terrible for 2 seasons in a row, but it's skewed by 2 things. Week 1 against Miami, Chan wasn't there yet, but Miami just did whatever they wanted in the passing game. They didn't need to run. And then week 4 against Vegas can't run against anybody, and Josh Jacobs was averaging around 1.5 yards per carry. So those good performances in terms of rushing yards allowed that the Chargers look like on paper were really, kind of not authentically true. But the 2 other games in between, they allowed like 130 and 140. And the explosive run rate allowed for the Chargers is still the same as last year. It's actually up from last year, from 12.2% to 14%. So I kind of like that. I have 2 chances. Even if Pollard is a little cooked and not a 5 yard per carry type guy and more of a 4, well, that combined with the Chargers not being the team that we've seen at the 4 weeks statistically, but more the team that we saw for the previous 30-some odd games, I like those 2 lines.
Yeah, and just to mention again, that clock emoji next to it, implying that this is being steamed to the over. So this is probably more of an act now if you like it. This line is moving up. But as for the other 2, can definitely shop around, find your best price, maybe find a little bit of a different number. But all 3 of these plays overs that we like, we will go to the recap slide later, and you guys can take a look at that. But for now, Steven, you got a break. We're going to bring in Derek. We're going to talk about 3 more picks where we think these lines really are just misplaced. Before we get into it, we have Gus Edwards. We want to wait and see because we're waiting on an injury report here, correct?
Yes, we're waiting on the injury report because it will affect this line.
Right.
So with Gus Edwards, when you add in the juice on minus 115, because that's where I saw like the best price when I started doing research on this. When you add that in, then he has a projected rushing yards of 44. So his average projection yards is 48. But however, the Titans have a nose tackle by the name of Tart. Tart hasn't been playing this whole week in practice, and I think the line is reflecting that. If Tart actually plays, then I believe this line will go down because whenever he does play, the yards per carry for opposing running backs is only 2.9 yards per carry. But when he's not playing, it is 4.4 yards per carry. So that's a big difference between him going over this and going under.
Yeah.
So just look at the injury report on that. That will tell you all that you need to know. So if he doesn't play, then this line will most likely stay the same or slightly go up. But if he does play, I think this line will definitely go down.
Mm-hmm. And then we move over to Chicago, hosting the Vikings, DJ Moore. You look at this line and you look at his target share and you look at how many passing yards the Vikings are allowing. The math isn't really mathing here. You think this line should be higher?
Yes. If this was going into week 4, 59.5 yards receiving at a line of at the juice of minus 115. That's where I saw like the best price.
Mm-hmm.
So when you add those together, the juice with the line, then it's 63 receiving yards. That would be great going into week 4. Mm-hmm. However, in weeks 4 and 5, he has doubled his projections each of those weeks. And so the Minnesota Vikings, they're giving up 244 yards passing and on average to their opponents. So when you take the 37% of the receiving yards that DJ Moore is responsible for, and you multiply it by the 244, you get 91 potential receiving yards for DJ Moore. That is substantially higher than this 59.5. So they're going by on what he was doing before week 4 and also what his usage was from last year. Mm-hmm. And then also the model likes the over as well than this.
Yeah, it seems like the Bears are kind of a different offense the past 2 weeks. They put up 68 points, and it doesn't seem like Vegas is recognizing that, especially against this Vikings defense. We'll go to the Seahawks playing at the Bengals. You can look at Noah Fant's yards, but it seems like the lines are ignoring how poorly the Bengals defense plays against tight ends.
Yes. So Noah Fant, if you was looking at his receiving yards from last year, he was averaging 28. when it's 21.5, when you add in the juice of, once again, I've been finding a lot of minus 115s on these lines. But when you add that in, that's only 24 potential receiving yards that the line states by itself when you add in the juice. Mm-hmm. So they are going by on what his production was from last year. Mm-hmm. This year, however, the tight ends, he is receiving 53% of the tight end receptions. Mm-hmm. So you multiply that times the Bengals, they give up 53.5 receiving yards to tight ends on average to opponents each week. So you multiply that times the 53%, you have over this 21.5 easily. Yeah. So I don't think they're factoring in how bad this defense is on tight ends. But if they did, this line should have been higher.
Yeah. Steven mentioning a crazy line over here. If you want to fade the DJ Moore prop, you can get him at 61.5 yards, which is a pretty big difference. Rick was asking if we like over 4.5 receptions for DJ Moore. I know the model has him at 5.4, but does your personal opinion take that any more into account?
Yeah, so with him, he's literally the only target that Fields has been going to. He trusts. And he gets open. And then also, people forget that DJ Moore has a top 10 in the last 3 years in receiving yards for 10 yards, passing 10 air yards or less. Mm-hmm. And that's what Fields specializes in. That's where his passing percentage goes up. So that would be a lot of short passes. If they can't run the ball because they have 2 running backs that are out, most likely going to be out in Herbert and the backup, the rookie. So then they're going to be starting like the 3rd string running back. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, it's not the 3rd string running back because they took him off the practice field and then made him the starter this week. So they're probably not going to be able to run the ball. So that's why that 4.5. Yeah, I didn't take that into consideration till they asked me. But yeah, that sounds like a good number to take the over.
Right. And the Vikings run defense is certainly nothing to mess with. They've been really competitive this season so far as well. One of few things going well for them. All right. So with that, we'll head to the recap slide. So we like these. A lot of overs from the team because we are not boring and that's just way more fun. But we have Jake in spirit. His college football props are here. Take a picture, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do to get through the weekend. And that's all we have for now. The most important thing, not the most important thing, but a very crucial part of the week is the Sunday look ahead show that me and Steven do at night. We'll do it around 7:30 after those 4 p.m. games, and we'll get you the best value of the week. We've been doing a pretty good job of predicting where these lines will go. So tune in Sunday, just around right after Early Edge when they do their Sunday night show. That's a really, really important show to see. Steven?
Yep. Hopefully I'll be happy where, talking smack about the Ravens win. Yeah. Or I may be curled up in like a little tiny little ball.
Yeah. My life's better when my boss is happy, so I'm rooting for the Ravens. And on that note, we will see you guys Sunday night. Good luck with your bets this weekend and have a great Friday.